President Donald Trump says he wants the US to take control of Gaza after permanently relocating displaced Palestinians.
Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss Syria's economic recovery.
Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has called Tuesday's mass shooting in Örebro the worst in his country's history. The head of the UN's atomic watchdog says he will visit Moscow amid fears of nuclear fallout from strikes on Ukraine. President Donald Trump has said he wants the United States to take control of Gaza after permanently resettling displaced Palestinians outside the war-torn region. The president added that he wouldn't rule out deploying US troops to support Gaza's reconstruction.
The US will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Trump's comments came as he welcomed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for talks at the White House, the first foreign leader to visit the US president in his second term. Their meeting comes amid discussions of a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and a temporary truce deal for Gaza's reconstruction, something that Trump and his advisors have claimed is not viable. But Egypt and Jordan, as well as other Arab nations, have rejected calls by Trump to relocate the territory's 2.3 million Palestinians. And although hardline right-wing members of Netanyahu's government have embraced Trump's comments, the Israeli Prime Minister is also facing pressure to end the temporary truce and continue with the war. Meanwhile, protesters and families of Israeli hostages in Gaza marched to the US Embassy in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, calling on President Trump to reach an agreement to release all the remaining hostages.
At least 2 Israeli soldiers were killed on Tuesday after a gunman attacked an Israeli military checkpoint in the occupied West Bank. Israel's Defense Forces (IDF) said the Palestinian gunman was later killed by its troops. The shooting took place in the morning at a military post in Tyre in the northern part of the West Bank, according to the military statement. 8 Israeli soldiers were wounded in the attack, including 2 who are currently in serious condition. Israeli media reported the attack came amid an ongoing counter-terrorism offensive in the northern West Bank. The region has seen a surge in violence since Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack on southern Israel from the Gaza Strip.
Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss Syria's economic recovery. They also spoke about the presence of Kurdish-led forces in the north of the country, which Turkey considers to be a security threat. The interim president was welcomed by the Turkish president and a small group of the honor guard at the entrance of the presidential palace. It was a low-key ceremony compared to visits of other heads of state, who are usually received with military bands and troops escorting them. Al-Shara, who was appointed last week, was a former rebel leader who led the insurgents who toppled President Bashar al-Assad in December. Turkey, who was a strong backer of groups opposed to al-Assad during the 13-year civil war, is considered to be one of the new administration's key allies. Erdogan's office said talks would focus on steps towards Syria's economic recovery and its security and stability.
Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has called Tuesday's mass shooting at a school in Örebro the worst in his country's history. Speaking at a joint news conference with Justice Minister Gunnar Strömmer, Kristersson said a darkness is being cast over Sweden.
Vi har idag sett ett brutalt dödligt våld mot helt oskyldiga människor. Det här är den värsta massskjutningen i svensk historia. Ännu saknas väldigt många svar. Och jag kan inte ge de svaren heller.
The gunman is reported to have opened fire at the campus Risberska school in Örebro at around 12:30 p.m. after many students had gone home following a national exam. Swedish police say about 10 people, including the gunman, were killed, but they have not yet provided a definitive number of how many were wounded. Authorities have said there are no suspected connections to terrorism at this point, adding there were also no warning signs before the attack. The head of the UN's atomic watchdog says he intends to visit Moscow in the coming days to discuss Russia's persistent attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which he says threaten nuclear safety.
We are very clear, I have from the very beginning of this war insisted and managed to keep a very open channel of communication with, of course, with Kyiv and with Moscow. I met President Putin several times, Minister Lavrov, and the CEO of Rosatom, people from the military.
It comes after Grossi visited an electrical substation in Kyiv on Tuesday, during which he was shown the damage caused to the country's key power grid facilities by Russian strikes. Grossi says this damage poses a threat to nuclear safety by potentially disrupting vital cooling procedures at atomic plants. He added that there were a few occasions where we had close calls with regard to Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, which is under Russian occupation. Zaporizhia has repeatedly been caught in the crossfire of fighting, and while its 6 reactors have been shut down for months, it still needs power and staff to operate crucial cooling systems and other safety features.
Norway's Prime Minister presented his new government on Tuesday following a cabinet reshuffle. The biggest surprise was former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg returning as Finance Minister. The veteran politician served as Norway's Prime Minister for 9 years before joining NATO from 2014 to 2024. He will now be replacing Slagsvold Vedum after a fierce debate over EU energy policies forced the country's ruling coalition government to split last week.
Jeg står her I dag med den første rene Arbeiderpartiregjering på 25 år. Her det noen nye ansikter, noen kjente ansikter og noen veldig kjente ansikter. Men I sum så dette et lag som klar til å ta fatt på å styre Norge I en veldig krevende utsatt tid.
Stoltenberg announced his return to politics on Tuesday after, quote, having carefully considered the current challenges we face. Norway, which is not a member of the EU, could potentially be hit by tariffs from both Brussels and Washington should US President Donald Trump follow through with his tax threats. During his time at NATO, Stoltenberg was instrumental in convincing Trump to stick with the alliance.
Clean-up efforts are underway in the Italian city of Messina in Sicily after heavy rainfall caused severe flooding and landslides. Italy's National Fire Service said it was called out to more than 100 storm-related incidents, which included rescuing motorists trapped in flooded underpasses. The service said the situation was critical in the Orto Liuzzo and San Saba areas of Messina, where firefighters had to use inflatable boats to rescue residents trapped in their homes.
Pollution, overconsumption, waste. These are the three biggest problems Europeans say they face with water. But it also includes devastating floods on one hand and the threat of desertification on the other. According to the European Commission's State of Water report, the EU's water resources are under significant pressure.
Less than 40% of our EU surface water bodies achieve good ecological status, with healthy ecosystem being home to many species and with water able to regenerate itself. And only a quarter achieve good chemical status, meaning that the relevant thresholds of hazardous substances are not exceeded. Many member states recognize that this is a big problem. Some progress has been made over the last years, but there is still a lot of work to do.
The Commissioner said that the EU has directives and recommendations, but their implementation is not perfect. Therefore, the executive will initiate a dialogue with various sectoral representatives as well as with the member states.
We need to do more to ensure the security of our water supply, because citizens need clean water, farmers and businesses need a stable water supply, and we need to protect our fresh and marine waters to reduce flood risks, because the cost of inaction is too high, knowing the situation will become worse.
Based on the current reports, the European Commission will present an EU water resilience strategy this spring.